Hi everyone, how's it going? How are my fellow TIs doing today? Listen, I've got my bottle of lemonade right here because this is going to be a really, really long video. Now, why is it going to be a long video? Well, yesterday I said that I was going to talk about the effects of dopamine on the body. Lately, I've been suffering with restlessness, like not being able to sleep, but the upswing of that is that I've been mega focused and really, really busy. So there is a positive side to it. And it really got me thinking about the connection between gangstalking and dopamine overload. Now, I've written some notes down, like I've written notes down here talking about like all kinds of different shit, you know. So I've got my notes here. I'm gonna go through it bit by bit, and then I'm gonna walk you through as much as I can. So to start off with, just to give you a little bit of detail into what's going on in my situation, the gang stalking is still going on. It's low level at the moment. It's not high level at the moment. There's little stuff here and there. It's just like trying to get a rise out of you. It's just at this point, either shit or get off the pot. I really don't care what they have to say. And as for trying to get me to be afraid of death, I mean, like, there are attempts made on my life every day. Am I supposed to give a shit? And if it's really the case that they're trying to take the attempted murder of me more seriously, well, that means I have to be extra productive, right? Seeing this evidently that they're trying to say, oh, you're not going to have much time. Okay, cool. That means I have to get on with my business as much as I can. Do you understand what I mean? I'm not going to bring it into existence, but, it's just one of those things where the older you get and the more you get used to gang stalking, the more you just think to yourself, like, this is pathetic, bro. You ain't got shit to say. There's nothing that you can tell me. So with that in mind, I've got to read you guys something about dopamine overload, and I'm going to sort them into two categories, all right? So the dopamine overload thing, I'm going to sort into two categories. I'm going to sort them into dopamine reliance and dopamine addiction. Now, it sounds like they're the same, but they're not. There's a difference between needing dopamine in order to function and being addicted to it when you already don't need it. It's two different things. And the connection with gang stalking is that they're killing you through stress. And if they're killing you through stress, ultimately, then what they're doing is they're elevating your dopamine. And that's how they are basically killing the surplus population, because what does overload of dopamine lead to? It leads to aggression. It leads to ruthlessness. It does lead to, better strategy and being more alert and being more productive. But that's just in the short term. In the long run, it leads to a whole host of problems that essentially make the world worse around us. It makes people more selfish. It makes people less caring. So through the overload of stress, what the gang stalkers and what, the powers that be, we call them the powers that be because really we don't know what to call them. What gang stalking and the powers that be ultimately do is they do this sort of Nazi tactic of overloading the human population with dopamine, which is basically overloading us with stress and getting us obsessed with our own desires. Those who demonstrate that they can actually take this dopamine and use it best towards their advantage, they are usually the ones who are privileged, and they are usually the ones who are favored. Okay? Really think about the landscape of our current society. Okay? And think about the hierarchy. The hierarchy is not dependent upon superiority in any other sense other than how much one relies on dopamine just to fucking function. Okay? Now, there are aforementioned body parts that I mentioned that contributes to dopamine overload. If you'd like to look at the video with regards to paranoid schizophrenia and see the links that I've put up, you can look at that video. I'll post a link to the video on this one so that you'll know what I'm talking about. There are links, several links pointing to certain damage in the body contributing to paranoid schizophrenia, which in turn comes from dopamine overload and serotonin deficiency. So that's the introduction to it. Now, the first point that I want to talk about, speaking of serotonin, right? Serotonin is often seen as the opposite to dopamine. Dopamine is ultimately a stimulant, okay? It's a stimulant in the body that encourages activity and effortless activity in the body. It enables us to have clearer intention, clearer desires, and to act upon them. That's what dopamine does ultimately for the body. Serotonin is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. It encourages rest, it encourages relaxation. If not physically, then certainly emotionally. Actually, it encourages both. What am I talking about? So serotonin encourages relaxation and encourages rest. Ideally for the gang stalkers, what they would like to do to targeted individuals is to lessen our serotonin, because otherwise, why would they weaponize every single thing that we do, especially if it's something positive? What they want to do ultimately is lessen our serotonin and up our dopamine. And on top of that, what they don't want is for us to become dopamine reliant, because if we become dopamine reliant, then we go from being a threat to them to really being a threat to them, because then we find ways to maneuver through their system and gain power over the situation. So they want us to be low in serotonin and they want us to be addicted to dopamine. That's the ideal. They don't want us too low in serotonin, because then we won't be docile enough. But they want us just low enough to not be happy. And they want us just high enough to be addicted to dopamine. So in other words, they want us to be functioning depressives. Now, I'm not the only person who's talked about this. I have a friend on Facebook who talked about this years ago, about needing the public to be functioning depressives. And with gang stalking and with TIs, they want us to be barely functioning and even more depressed. So they want us just to click below normal people, just enough for us to be more effortlessly controlled. Okay, so that's why serotonin is important to the conversation, because they want to lower our serotonin. They don't want it all the way in the floor, because like I said, if you're low in dopamine and you're low in serotonin and you're high in dopamine, that means you have enough power and enough desire to overtake them, and that's not what they want. All right. So where is serotonin found? Serotonin is found in our blood platelets. In layman's terms, right? Blood platelets are those things that allow our wounds to heal. The more platelets we have in the body is the more, the more capable our bodies are of healing wounds. So if you have a minor cut on here and you start bleeding, if you have enough platelets in the body and you have a healthy amount of platelets, that cut might go away in about 5 to 10 minutes. But if your platelets are a bit lower, it could take 10 to 15 minutes. So the platelets in your body are what allow your body to heal. Now, serotonin is found in blood platelets, the same platelets that allow wounds to heal. Serotonin is also found in our central nervous system. And again, gang stalking or control of human beings in general is all about manipulating the central nervous system, the brain and the nerves. And serotonin is also found in the digestive system. So there's a direct correlation between gut health and how happy we are and how relaxed we are. Okay, so serotonin in particular is found in the intestine. All right. Now, when it comes to non-ionized radiation, what happens with our blood platelets is that at first they start to increase. At first they increase in order to defend the body. For a short amount of time, the platelets will naturally increase in order to protect your body. All right. So at first, when the body's attacked, because the body has natural mechanisms that it has to protect you when you're being attacked. But then over time, the cumulative effect of non-ionized radiation reduces the platelets in your body. And when you have reduced platelets, you have reduced serotonin. And when you have reduced serotonin in your body, you have elevated anxiety, you have elevated aggressiveness, you have elevated selfishness. All these different things come into play when you have a cumulative effect on the blood platelets in your body, a cumulative effect in terms of the blood platelets in your body lessening over time due to non-ionized radiation. It makes you more aggressive, makes you more selfish, it can even make some people more predatory. So that's another thing. And that comes as a result of not only long-range acoustic devices and active denial systems, which are basically called directed energy weapons. It's also the radiation that comes from our technology. We've got to include that too, because if we spend enough time on technology, it completely damages our brains and nervous systems permanently and reshuffles them. It basically restructures our central nervous system, and that's another thing that has an effect on our serotonin. Because remember, that's where serotonin is found, in the CNS. So we've got that. When you don't have enough serotonin, you will know if your wounds don't heal the way they're supposed to. That's when you'll know there isn't enough serotonin in your body. And again, like I said, the central nervous system is routinely attacked by active denial systems, that's directed energy weapons, and long-range acoustic devices. So once the serotonin in your body is lowered, it makes you imbalanced. And once you're imbalanced and the dopamine is increased, it makes you more susceptible to psychosis. It makes you more susceptible to mental illness. It's for this reason why, even if you're too strong for all these attacks to result in mental illness immediately, LRAD will be used against you as a TI. This is why LRAD is used against you as a TI, especially when your serotonin is low. Because from there, it's easy to convince people that you're hearing voices or that you're delusional or all the rest of it. That's why they accuse all targeted individuals of being paranoid schizophrenic. Like I said before, they are causing the illness as much as they can. And whilst they're doing that, they are creating autosuggestion of this person has paranoid schizophrenia, this person has paranoid schizophrenia, this person has paranoid schizophrenia, this person has psychosis, this person has psychosis. It's autosuggestion. So they're engaging in actions specifically designed to lower your serotonin and increase your mental health issues as a result of dopamine. So they're deliberately doing that, whilst at the same time creating autosuggestion through their perps that you're mad, that you're crazy, that you have like paranoid schizophrenia, that you have psychosis. So they're creating autosuggestion in the body whilst they're torturing you. Sometimes, in order for something to be true, it doesn't have to be true right away. You can make it true by manifesting it. And that's essentially what they're doing when they're torturing your body a particular way in order to increase your dopamine and lower your serotonin and to make you barely functional. They're casting a spell over you, essentially. Like, when I used to hear Christian targeted individuals talking about, oh, it's demonic, it's spiritual warfare, it's like, I used to think, like, just sit down somewhere, man. Like, but when you think about it, they're right. It's just that they don't know how to say it. They don't know how to get it across. They lean constantly on the Bible as their reference, But if they were to study the science of how these things work, they would realize they're right, but they would have the right words to communicate that, rather than just saying, oh, it's demonic, oh, it's demonic, it's witchcraft. It is witchcraft. It's manifestation. That's exactly what they're doing. When they're lowering your serotonin and increasing your dopamine and trying to make sure you have psychosis and then going around telling everybody you have psychosis before you even fucking have it, that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to manifest illness in you. So it is a spell. It is a curse, essentially, that they're trying to put on you. But it's not necessarily through like magical rituals, the ones that we're used to. It's done with autosuggestion, and it's done through the overload of dopamine. This is a tactic used by dopamine reliant people who have control over dopamine addicted people, who in turn take those dopamine overloads and impart that onto you. They are passing their desires onto you. That is a spell. That is something that is happening in the quantum realm. That is something that is happening in the quantum realm. Okay? So, all of it is true. When these targeted individuals talk about spells and all that type of shit, that's what all of this is. But then again, I would say that because I'm practicing, right? I'm practicing myself, so I know what that sounds like. Right? But if you have to understand the scientific aspects of it first before you can talk about the spiritual, because really what we call the spiritual isn't the spiritual at all. It's astral, and it's based around the quantum realm and manifesting things on a quantum level. Everything that we're going through, energetic weapons, long-range acoustic devices, it's not quite quantum. It's not quite quantum. It's still within the realms of material reality, but it's closer to the astral realm than thermobaric bombs are. It's closer to the astral realm than guns are. It's closer to the astral realm than knives are. So all of these things happening, NLP basically fucks with the mind, hypnosis, all these types of things are... NLP is entirely possible through street theater. And NLP is used all the fucking time. And then you've got hypnosis through long-range acoustic devices. That is entirely possible. I wouldn't be surprised if it's been used before. That's entirely possible. In fact, I know for a fact it's been used before. I've spoken to a targeted individual who's had that used on them before. So yeah. As much as I didn't want to admit it and I didn't want to say it because, I just felt like it was an attack on what I practiced. As much as I did not want to admit it, when they are injuring your body and then turning around saying you have an illness, if they're trying to manifest a certain illness by attacking certain parts of your body and then they tell you you have it and they inflict their dopamine overload on you, they inflict their desire and their intent on you on top of the injuries that they're causing, that is a fucking spell. It can be broken, but it takes time and generations to do. The time it takes to build a system like this, like you can't even imagine the amount of time it's going to take to dismantle it. Several lifetimes. And we are never the same people in each lifetime. That's the fact. So that's that on that. And then also the central nervous system is also routinely attacked through psychological abuse. So psychological abuse is lowering your dopamine levels. Okay? So that's the first part with regards to the serotonin. Now I've got to get into the second part with regards to the solar plexus. Now, a lot of TIs will notice that on top of the usual body parts associated with increasing dopamine and increasing stress levels, many TIs, or at least one TI that I know online, has complained about being hit in the solar plexus. And this is where This is where I have to talk about the other side of the equation, because remember what I said to you, they don't want so much dopamine in your system that you turn around and you use that anger and you use that desire to your advantage. So what do? They hit your solar plexus. So where your solar plexus is found, that's here, like under the breastbone, right? When they hit you here it's not responsible, but it's closely linked with the stomach, the kidneys, the liver, and the adrenal glands. Remember when I told you that attack on the adrenal glands, the top part of the kidneys, were contributing to paranoid schizophrenia? That's exactly what I'm talking about. So when you're attacking here, you're also reducing protection over those body parts, and also it's taking the wind out of your body. When you get punched there, it literally takes the wind out of your body. So if you're getting attacked there through electronic weapons, it also limits the amount of oxygen getting into your body. If the amount of oxygen getting into your body is limited, then it affects your ability to heal your body, and it also affects your serotonin levels. Because remember, in order to maximize serotonin, one of the methods is deep breathing. If you're continuously having the wind knocked out of you by having your solar plexus attacked, then it affects your ability to heal yourself, and it affects your ability to regulate your emotions or regulate your desires. So the chemicals surrounding the solar plexus as well, they need to be talked about. So we've got cortisol, of course, that's the stress hormone that increases the metabolism. It regulates the blood pressure, reduces inflammation, and induces the fight or flight response. There's aldosterone, which regulates the body's salt and water. This is especially important because the salt and water is responsible for, if you have too much salt in the body, you can have water retention. And, being hit here partially dehydrates the body as well as non-ionized radiation in and of itself. Being hit here, it contributes to dehydration in the body. So the aldosterone regulates the body's salt and water, and also regulates blood pressure. Adrenaline, you already know what adrenaline does. Fight or flight response. It slows down the digestion so that the blood in your body can automatically be sent to your muscles. So, when your adrenaline is up, that's why a lot of people say that you're stronger. Some people, you say you're weaker with adrenaline. But if all the blood is flowing to your muscles, then it must make you stronger, no? So I'm feeling like adrenaline actually makes you stronger briefly while it's protecting your body. Like I said, all the chemicals, everything in the body is designed to heal and protect you. So we've got that, and we've got noradrenaline, which affects arousal, attention, cognition, and stress reactions. So attacks to the solar plexus, it stresses us out just enough for us to have the cortisol, but not beyond their control, okay? There's a reason why the solar plexus chakra is associated with the strength of identity and strength of self-control. It's because when you are hit here and here is damaged, the wind is knocked out of your body, which affects your ability to defend yourself. It affects your adrenaline, it affects your cortisol, it affects your aldosterone, it affects your noradrenaline. It essentially, when you are hit here, it affects your ability to protect and heal yourself. There is a reason why the solar plexus point is associated with strength and control. Yeah, there's a reason why the solar plexus is associated with strength and control. I've got to repeat that again for those of you who didn't catch that. There's a reason why the solar plexus is associated with strength and control. Okay, because when you are hit here, it affects your ability to heal yourself and to strengthen yourself. Okay? So that's the second part talked about. The second part was talking about the attacks on the solar plexus. And now I've got to get to the third part, okay? So the third part is, right? Third part is about dopamine output and overload, the results of that, okay? Now, the results of that are ADHD, bipolar disorder, manic phases, obsessive compulsive disorders, paranoia, psychosis, paranoid schizophrenia, all of those things, right? Now, I want you to think about the most powerful people in the world. Think about how the world systemically operates. Think about the richest people in the world and what some of those super rich people get up to. Now, a lot of people will know that some, not all, some hyper wealthy people get up to a lot of nasty shit. You're not just talking about, okay, this is adults only. You're not just talking about orgies. You're not just talking about, reckless behavior and having all that behavior covered up. We're not just talking about that. We're also talking about murders. We're also talking about sacrifices. All of these things, when you are super rich and you have accomplished the goal of having more money than God, where do you go from there? In order for you to maintain your wealth and in order for you to keep what you want, you have to keep that dopamine on a higher level. That's what it means to be dopamine reliant. Basically, these people are keeping their dopamine up, killing people, mistreating people, predatory as fuck. All of them are doing this in order to survive, because without that dopamine level, they are afraid of where it will land them if they are not preying on people. Predatory behavior, it actually elevates your dopamine. That's what nobody tells you. Predatory behavior elevates your dopamine. So a lot of the most powerful people on earth are dopamine reliant. And their goons are usually dopamine addicted. Okay? Now, the characteristics associated with people with high dopamine are usually high intelligence. Again, think about how the way the system works. This system knows us better than we do. Or at least it expresses knowledge of ourselves better than we do. Okay? And then there's a personal sense of destiny. All the so-called great leaders had that. Napoleon, Napoleon. Who else? I had all the names. I had all the names previously. So there's Napoleon, like lots of royalty. Some of the royalties that I've been reading about, they all had a personal sense of destiny. If you look throughout history and you look at the leaders, many of them had a sense of their own destiny. That's an important part of dopamine. And truth be told, there is actually some truth to their belief, because the thing is, part of destiny is desire, right? Part of your destiny is desire, part of your destiny is intent, and part of your destiny is action. So this, personal sense of destiny as a result of elevated dopamine is actually not wrong. That's part of your destiny. Part of your destiny is what you do. The other part is what you know, but we'll come to that. Okay? So they have a personal sense of destiny. They have an obsession with achieving goals. Now, I'm going to be real with you, right? Again, think about the most powerful people in society, and especially think about those who are predatory. They are a classic example of obsession with achieving goals. It doesn't matter what those goals are. That goal could be making more money. That goal could be climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro. That goal could be seducing a person. That goal could be, I don't know, sending someone crazy or sending someone to a mental health hospital. It doesn't matter what those goals are. Anyone who is dopamine reliant or dopamine addicted is going to be obsessed with accomplishing that goals. And the way it works is that you can create a goal out of literally anything. And the humanity of the people involved does not fucking matter, which leads me to emotional detachment. Emotional detachment leading to ruthlessness. Okay? Now, again, think about the most powerful leaders in society. Very wealthy, very powerful, often ruthless, often making decisions that have to remove other people's emotions, having to remove empathy from the equation. Bravery without morals is basically cruelty. And that's exactly what is exercised against targeted individuals every day through dopamine addicted perps and through dopamine reliant handlers and benefactors of this program. Okay. And then we've got the propensity for risk taking. Again, we have a system of morals in this society that we claim that we uphold, but quite often the most successful people in the society are the ones who read the rules, not so they can follow them, but so that they can see exactly what they can get away with. It takes particularly risky behavior to be well versed in religion or law or banking or any of these things, just so that you can learn how to move through the loopholes in order to get what you want. It takes a certain amount of balls to do that. And dopamine overloaded people or people with high dopamine have a lot of fucking balls. Now, I can't diagnose antisocial personality disorders per se, but when I really think about high dopamine levels, it really makes me think about narcissism to a lesser degree. That's more dopamine addicted. Narcissism, sociopathy, and especially psychopathy. That's what it makes me think of. It makes me think of the dark triad when we're talking about the traits of high dopamine people, but that's for another time, all right? So think about the most powerful people in the world and then think about those traits, okay? Fourth point I want to come to is that all the traits that I'm talking about, the high intelligence, or at least the high articulacy, because all major hormones demonstrate a level of intelligence and competence. They just don't express them in the same way. So the high articulacy of dopamine, the personal destiny of dopamine, the obsession with achieving goals, the emotional detachment, the propensity for risk-taking, all of this happens just before the dopamine reaches its peak. And when the dopamine reaches its peak, we've got maximum competition and aggression, which means antisocial behavior. The mental health issues, from what I've observed, right, of those who are addicted to dopamine is what happens when, the dopamine reaches its peak and it's just about to come down. So the mental health issues that come as a result of the dopamine shit or the overloaded dopamine, it's like the dopamine is up there and then it's just coming down, right? When that happens, that's when we get the bipolar disorders, the obsessive compulsive disorders, the paranoia, the psychosis, the paranoid schizophrenia, because through these illnesses, that's a way of the body trying to regulate itself after being overloaded with dopamine for that long. That's the body trying to regulate itself. That's the body trying to reset itself. And I'll explain how. All right. The body can only sustain high amounts of one thing for so long before it gets sick. That's like with anything in life. We can only sustain high amounts of one thing before our bodies reject them or our souls reject them. Okay. Now, with regards to paranoia comes as the result of coming out of the dopamine haze where you were determined to get what you wanted come hell or high water. Paranoia is not necessarily self-awareness, but it's that general feeling that you can't place that people are against you. That's because you hurt a lot of people when you're in that dopamine high and you took it too far. You hurt people. So now you're anticipating something happening to you. You're anticipating something bad happening. Again, if you look at all the great leaders of the past, they all had this paranoia. That's their conscience biting them, but they don't know it's their conscience. And the way systemic oppression works is that they prepare for the consequences because of this paranoia. Think about how gangstalking actually works and the root of where that comes from. It comes from preemptive control. Hitler was talking about stopping the Nazi regime in its nucleus. That is essentially what gangstalking does. That's why people like us are picked as experimental subjects for attempts to stop small nations from rebelling and to stop small organizations from becoming too powerful before they start. It all starts with behavioral control experimentation and human trafficking involved in gangstalking. It all starts here. Okay, this is where it all starts. It all starts here. So the paranoia, from dopamine reliant people, what they have done is they've taken that paranoia and they channeled it into preemptive measures against anybody that they will perceive to be a threat to the status quo. Hey, Laura. They would take it and utilize it towards anybody they would perceive to be a threat to the status quo. Paranoia. That is what it looks like in systemic oppression. That is what it looks like in the macrocosm of society. It looks like over the top intelligence measures to cover up their own wrongdoing. It looks like gangstalking. It looks like preemptively diagnosing all targeted individuals as paranoid schizophrenic. That's paranoia. And on top of that, treating millions of, the world's citizens as enemies to the world before they've even done anything. That's also paranoia. But it comes as a result of all the actions that were taken, just before that dopamine reached its high and all the predatory behavior that came with it. So then we've got OCD. That's the body. When you have OCD as a result of the slight dopamine come down, when you have OCD, that is your body attempting to have a safe amount of routine. Routine is found when you have more serotonin in your body. When you have more serotonin in your body, you have more room for routine. Routine relaxes you. So when you have obsessive compulsive disorders, that's your body attempting to reset itself, relax itself, rest itself with routine. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the body attempting to gain a sense of normalcy, to come down from that high without crashing. That is essentially what your OCD is attempting to do. Because, routine allows for a certain amount of mental and emotional rest. If you know what's coming, it allows you for a certain amount of calm and a certain amount of peace. When you do the same things every day, it gives you a sense of safety. That's what OCD essentially is. It's your body looking for a sense of safety. And then you've got instinct overdrive, right? That's paranoid schizophrenia, psychosis, and delusions. What I always say about psychosis, I've actually experienced this in the past. What I always say about paranoid schizophrenia, even though I don't have, oh, thank you, my darling. Even though I don't have paranoid schizophrenia, I have had psychosis and I have had delusions before. When you have psychosis and delusions, and when you have, anything of that nature going on with you mentally, what's happening is that your instincts are playing 6 degrees of separation with anything in yours or anybody else's life that could contribute to your current situation. On top of that, your psychosis and delusions could alert you to something that could happen in the future, but your timing is off. Your timing is off. And because of your state of mind, you don't have the ability to decipher the symbolism that your brain is giving you, or that the astral realm or supreme intelligence is giving you. You don't have the discernment to sift through it because your brain is too traumatized and it needs to feel safe at the moment. So for me, psychosis, delusion, paranoid schizophrenia is playing 6 degrees of separation. Your instincts are in overdrive, playing 6 degrees of separation with anything or anyone that could be contributing to the situation that you're in now, or associated or correlating with the situation that you're in now. It's just that the timing is fucking off. There's no reason, there's no pragmatism there. Again, that's your body trying to protect you. That's your body trying to tell you that there's something up. And also there's a connection to supreme intelligence that's also trying to tell you that there's something up. I'm not saying it's not an illness. I'm not one of those people that says, oh, there is no such thing. I'm not woo-woo, okay? I believe that there are such things as illnesses, and I believe that we give names to those illnesses. When we use diagnoses properly, they could actually help people. I'm one of those people who believe that. But as it stands, we don't understand psychosis or delusions enough. We don't understand them enough because we don't understand our own instincts. So when we have that come down and emotions come into the equation, our instinct goes into overdrive. And when that happens, either we write our own ticket or we predict something that other people need to pay attention to. It's happened to me so many times. Some of the most prophetic visions that I have had have happened when I was extremely sick. Years later, everything I said when I was sick, it came to pass. Everything. So, yeah. And then we've got manic disorders. That's the return of emotional attachment. When you've had that dopamine high and, emotions don't matter, you can emotionally detach from the situation enough to be like, this is what I need to do and fuck everyone else. When there's that inevitable come down and you have those manic disorders, once again, that's your body trying to return at least some serotonin to it. That's your body trying to return at least some serotonin to it. And this is where dopamine blockers come in, but I'll get to that in another part of the video. So all these illnesses are as a result of a slight come down from the dopamine and your body desperately grasping for serotonin of any kind or anything that can evoke serotonin. So we've got the 5th point that I want to bring up, and that's gangstalking oppression plus the dopamine connection. Okay. So this is what I notice, and what I'm about to explain is a drastic oversimplification, and I mean drastic, because there are many complex factors to what I'm about to talk about here, many. But this is what I notice in general. This is the general outline of what I've observed. The people who are subjected to the most brutality are either the most balanced in their dopamine, or they do not live primarily off their dopamine. So that goes for a lot of marginalized communities. The more marginalized a person is, 9 times out of 10, is the more that their dopamine is either balanced or they do not live off their dopamine because they're not that aggressive. They're not that aggressive and they don't want anything except a life of peace. If those are the type of people that you're dealing with, right, that means either they're balanced dopamine wise or they don't live primarily off it, or it could be that they don't handle their dopamine very well. It could be that they don't manage high levels of dopamine, the high levels of dopamine that this society subjects you to. It doesn't, you don't handle that level of dopamine very well. That's on the other side of the coin. That could be another reason why you're marginalized. Okay? So, what I've written down here is balanced people with dopamine overload, or anybody who doesn't live primarily off dopamine with dopamine overload, or anybody who's vulnerable to dopamine and has dopamine overload. Catastrophe, because they have all these behaviors and they have tendencies of self-destruction and self-sabotage, but they also have the curse of being able to see exactly what they're doing whilst they're sabotaging themselves. So if you get somebody who's not dopamine reliant and not dopamine addicted, and you make them addicted to dopamine, they're all over the place. They're unlikely to function very well. They're likely to just barely function. And that's exactly what they're trying to do to us TIs. If you're a TI, likely you can't handle your dopamine very well, or you're balanced in your dopamine, or you don't live off your dopamine. And for somebody like that to be overloaded with dopamine constantly, it's a fucking disaster. Especially when you're young. That's the worst time to be overloaded with dopamine. And yet, when they overload you with dopamine while you're young, that's the perfect time for them to brainwash you. So, people who are used to dopamine over-reliance can utilize and thrive off that reliance. They turn desire into power. That's the most powerful people in the world. That's the more privileged people in the world. They can turn that dopamine overload into something they can use because they're reliant on dopamine in the first place. Okay? So this is where privilege, from what I've noticed, this is where privilege truly lies. It's about prioritizing people who are naturally predisposed to needing more dopamine in order to function, or being able to properly utilize dopamine in order to function. That's who privilege in society is given to. Okay? And when it comes to gangstalking, the hierarchy from lowest to highest that I can see, you've got the targeted individuals, and then you've got the perps who are dopamine addicts. Now, the addictions to dopamine, it could have like one fixed addiction or two fixed addictions to drugs or to sex or to anything really. Like, addictions are basically a security blanket for the soul. With perps are dopamine addicted. They're dopamine addicted, which makes them easy to control. They're basically barely functioning depressives because they're being led by the nose. They're led by their dopamine addiction all the time. And it's for that reason why when you're a targeted individual and it appears like perps haven't reached their goal of trying to upset you or trying to hospitalize you, they can go fucking nuts. It's because they're addicted to the dopamine high that comes with fulfilling a goal. Even if that goal is dangerous to not only you, but also themselves and their community. So perps are dopamine addicted. And then we've got handlers who, you've got like the community handlers who are kind of like, or the regional people who are kind of like, they're in between addicted and reliant, so they function better than the perps do. And then you've got the handlers, nationwide handlers. Basically, the higher up the food chain you go like from addiction into reliance. The higher up you go, the more you deal with people who are dopamine reliant rather than dopamine addicted. Because dopamine reliant people, again, they can function on the dopamine that they actually, they can function on, high quantities of dopamine without losing their power or without losing their position. Okay. Now, gangstalking mimics dopamine-related illnesses in order to create them in the target of those tactics. So, the manic phases. A lot of gangstalkers can definitely mimic manic phases. I'll give you an example. I was on the bus and I was recording people on the bus. I wasn't very subtle back then. I was recording people on the bus being, being weird, because perps usually act weird. What happened is that there was a whole hubbub of conversation, and the noise got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder, and then it's just drop, silence. So there's manic behavior of all kinds enlisted by perpetrators in order to throw you off. So it could be changing, being okay with you 1 minute and then the next minute they're not okay with you. Now, with normal people do that anyway, but with gang stalking, it's strategic. And then you've got manic behavior through yelling in public, directed conversations. Sometimes they shout and insult you directly in the hopes that you'll react. I've had that a couple of times. And, that's manic behavior. If you're yelling in public and having directed conversations that are nothing about anything, you're behaving manic. That's manic behavior. Okay. And if you're yelling, somebody's yelling out your name for no reason at all, which happens when you're a TI, they yell out your name for no reason at all. Like, that's manic behavior. So they engage in mad behavior. And the irony is, right, is that when you have a mental illness and they're dedicated towards hurting you as much as possible or getting as much of a possible, getting a reaction out of you as much as possible, they will engage in increasingly mad behavior in order to do that. Some of that mad behavior can even get violent. Spying on people, being obsessed with people, imagining people are against you when they're not. All of that is manic behavior. So it actually takes manic behavior, which is dopamine related, in order for this program to be effective. And then you've got the OCD, repeated phrases to trigger you, which, invokes the opposite of security and keeps your dopamine levels up. And then you've got obsessive goal pursuits. That's another OCD thing. And, it comes into the obsession with achieving goals. But the obsession with achieving goals and the obsession with getting a particular reaction out of you, again, that's mentally ill behavior. It's mentally ill behavior related to dopamine. Okay. And then we've got the psychosis. As a TI, you're routinely lied about. Again, everything is weaponized against you and sometimes deliberately misinterpreted in order to make you look as terrible as possible. And then there's the paranoid schizophrenia. A lot of perps have an overinflated sense of importance or communicate an overinflated sense of importance to you. So through mimicking the effects of dopamine illness and through hurting certain parts of your body and through telling you that you're sick, all of this desire and all of this dopamine energy is coming in your direction in order to manifest illness in you. And then we have to talk about the long-range acoustic devices that are hypnotizing you as well. That's another thing. But there's a lot that goes into it, attempting manifesting illness in you ultimately so they can control you. Okay? So it's about thinning the herd. Again, once again, it's about thinning the herd for the benefit of those continuously reliant on dopamine and needing it more and more. Okay? Now, come to the sixth part of the video, all right? Dopamine is essentially about desire. Dopamine is desire, like I said before. Through all the shit that I've talked about, dopamine is important. Don't let a damn thing fool you. Without dopamine, lots of us wouldn't be here. Without dopamine, we don't have a society. We don't have art. We don't have education. We have nothing without dopamine. Because even though serotonin allows us to rest and estrogen allows us to gain knowledge, that's for another video. Maybe, I don't know. Even though there are certain amounts of certain chemicals in our body that allow us to receive knowledge openly, dopamine is the Dopamine is the articulacy to explain that knowledge and to utilize that knowledge to our benefit. So let's not get this shit twisted. Dopamine can be extremely good to use. And if you're overloaded with dopamine as a targeted individual, there is a way that you can use that to your advantage. And I'll explain that in a few moments. Okay? But the overload of dopamine, it leads to endless work when you are constantly novelty seeking. You do flip from one thing to the other, but it also means you're constantly active. Dopamine addiction, dopamine reliance leads to endless work or endless, just a never-ending pit of pleasure seeking, of goal setting, trying to gain more and more over time. Dopamine reliance gets you into that pit of just needing to achieve more goals and get more depraved and have more shit to excite you, because like at certain points you run out of things to be excited by. So dopamine reliant people, they need to be excited in order to function. With dopamine addicted people, dopamine addiction leads to overabundance of consumption. If people are balanced in their dopamine, it means they're balanced in their work, and it means they're balanced in their consumption. What that means is that there's less control over them. If people are balanced in their dopamine function, that means they're less likely to work because there's no dopamine reliance there. And if they do work, they're not going to overwork themselves and try to basically overtake nature in order to get what they want. If they have balanced dopamine, they're going to work only as much as they need to in order to build something that they want to have. Like, it doesn't take a whole society for somebody to do that. And on top of that, somebody with balanced dopamine will probably consume less because they will need less. So balanced dopamine, or somebody who doesn't live off dopamine, those things combined leads to less control. Because if you can't dangle a carrot in front of somebody, then you can't lead them to where you need them to go. Dopamine is that carrot that the powers that be dangle in front of us. And once again, powerful people often project their needs onto us. They need dopamine all the time. So they're going to make sure that we think that we need it all the time. And that's how they keep us under control. Okay? Coming to the 7th part of the video. Now we've got to get into the dopamine blocking medications. Now, I'm of the mindset that every form of healing has a place. And I've heard it told that, with some targeted individuals that have taken psychiatric medications, they've experienced the targeting having less of an effect on them. This is why it ultimately doesn't matter. First of all, dopamine blockers are opiates. And opiates dull your nervous system. And that's just the beginning of it. It dulls your nervous system. When it's blocking your dopamine, it's not lessening your dopamine, it's not balancing your dopamine, it is blocking your dopamine. It affects your ability to function in ways that are adverse to actual good health. It depends upon how sick you actually are. If you're really, really sick, then you may need these dopamine blockers for a very short amount of time, and then you've got to wean yourself off them. But dopamine blockers are incredibly dangerous because they don't just affect your sexual reproductive organs, or they don't just affect your intelligence. They don't just affect they affect your digestive system. They affect your metabolism. That's why you gain weight. Your metabolism is affected. It affects your blood pressure. It affects your water retention. There are so many different things that dopamine blockers affect. They are not fucking healthy. They're not healthy. Okay? This is why if somebody is really, really sick, the idea is that they take it for a short amount of time, which buys them enough time to place nutrients into their body that will balance out their hormones, and then they wean themselves off the medication. At most, you should be taking those meds for about 8 months. You got people on this program that are on these medications for fucking years, forced to take them for years, just so that these cunts in power can cover up what they've been doing to their own citizens, committing treason essentially to their own citizens. So dopamine blockers are incredibly dangerous. My boyfriend Daryl Brown has talked endlessly about the dangers of dopamine blockers. He's met so many people who have suffered as a result of dopamine blockers in the body. Some of them have experienced, a lot of them have experienced actually, permanent nerve damage. He's interviewed people who have talked about this. Okay. So dopamine blockers are like an elastic band that snaps. Once you start taking them, the second that you stop taking them, this is what makes them so dangerous. You're only supposed to take them long term, but the way they're set up, if you wean yourself off them, it can have the effect of the dopamine symptoms coming back with a fucking vengeance. Okay? The dopamine floods can come fiercer than ever. So given that in mind, given what we know about dopamine blockers, that they damage the nervous system and they damage certain receptors in the body, given what we know about them, is there a way in which we can, balance out our chemicals without trying to kill off our dopamine? Is there a way we can do that? And the answer is surprisingly simple, okay? If you're especially sick, if somebody is especially sick and they need to be on those medications for a while, the first thing they can do is take them for a maximum of 8 months, but sort of gradually take them, have a sort of curve where they gently introduce the medications and then they have a peak and then they come back down again over the 8 months. So it has to be a gradual rise, peak, and then fall in terms of how they take the meds. So they start off with a low amount, getting into a higher amount, and then come back down. This allows their bodies to not be overly shocked by the psychiatric medications that they're taking. On top of that, whilst they're taking the medications, they should take nutritional supplements to balance out their cognitive function and their chemical output. It's a good idea to invest in colloidal nutrients, which is basically liquid nutrients. Liquid multivitamins is the best thing to consume. It's quite expensive, but liquid multivitamins, eating a fresh diet of fruit and veg, like eating more fruit and veg is definitely a must. And you're not supposed to eat meat every day of your life. You're supposed to eat meat about 3 days a week at most. I eat meat every day. I'm not supposed to do that. But you're supposed to eat meat about 3 days a week maximum. You're not supposed to eat meat every day of your life. So that adds to it. And then on top of that, lots of liquid nutrients, if you can possibly drink them, because if you drink liquid nutrients, it goes straight to your system. Check your allergies for that. Okay? So those are some ways that you can balance out your hormones. And then on top of that, a good idea is to aim your dopamine overload towards serotonin inducing activities. All right? Okay, so aiming your dopamine towards serotonin inducing activities. What are those serotonin inducing activities, right? They're obviously sleep, trying to aim your dopamine towards getting as much sleep as possible. It might be a fruitless endeavor sometimes, but it's worth a shot, innit? Also, eating tryptophan rich and insulin raising foods in moderation. So insulin raising foods are basically like complex carbs, like brown rice, brown bread. Again, I don't always eat the brown stuff. Sometimes I eat the white stuff. I prefer brown rice, honestly. Brown rice has more flavor, but sometimes I'll eat white bread, which is It's poison. It's basically poison. But I it depends on what I'm looking for with the brown bread. If I just want to make sandwiches, I'll get brown. But even bread is like, yeah, it's dicey. All right. So you need tryptophan rich foods like turkey or tofu or salmon. And then you've got insulin raising foods like complex carbs. Aerobic exercise is good because it introduces oxygen to your bloodstream, and on top of that, deep breathing increases your serotonin. So engaging in exercise that introduces oxygen into your body, that's what aerobic exercise is. It's basically you performing exercise anywhere where there's oxygen and introducing that oxygen into your body. So aerobic exercise is good. Soft exercises like yoga or Pilates, anything involving the incorporation of deeper muscles rather than your outer muscles, not only do they build strength in a way that weightlifting can't really, like not only does it strengthen your internal resilience, it also calms you down. It's calming, and it could be as simple as stretching every day. Like I stretch all the fucking time, and you wouldn't believe the amount of resilience that builds in my body. That's why I keep getting attacked in my joints, because when you stretch and when it increases the resilience in your body when active denial systems are fired at your joints. Do you understand what I'm saying? It increases your resilience to that. So stretching doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be stretching, right? And then you've got deep breathing, obviously. You've got calming frequencies. You've got socializing and helping others. Now, I've only been doing that more often, given my tarot readings and given that I'm usually out more during the summer anyway. So I get that it's easier to do during the summer than it is to do during the winter. But if you can get out and socialize and meet people and maybe do some volunteer work, or maybe engage in something that you love to do, but that ultimately helps others, that can be a good way of getting your serotonin levels up. Laughing more. Let me tell you something. The perps fucking hate it when you laugh. They fucking hate that shit. And not only because it feels like you're laughing at them, but because the more you laugh and the more you genuinely enjoy yourself, that's the better your mental health becomes. So they don't want you laughing. They don't want you laughing. They want you to feel self-conscious about it. They want you to feel like shit about laughing, because if you laugh, then you're not going to go crazy. And if you don't go crazy, they don't achieve their goals. And if they don't achieve their goals, their dopamine levels suffer. Their dopamine addiction suffers. So they start going crazy. You understand? But laughing is a good way to get your serotonin levels up. Did I talk about sunlight? Yeah, sunlight helps as well, which is why a lot of people have seasonal affective disorder, because sunlight, it boosts the serotonin in the body and it makes you more restful and makes you less stressed out. It also feeds your body, which makes you less likely to overeat, because the sun's rays has vitamins in them. It's got vitamin D in it. So the sun is actually feeding your body actively. Even when you're indoors and the sun is out, the sun is feeding your body, especially when the sun is not clouded. It's feeding your body. And the more melanin that you have is the more important it is for you to get out in the sun. Fabian, I'm talking to you. I'm really talking to you. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to myself most of all, because I hardly ever leave my fucking house. I don't leave my fucking house. Okay? But it's important to get out into the sun as much as you can, especially if you have melanin, because if you have melanin, the sun's rays won't reach your body as easily. Now, the good thing about that is that we don't burn, but the bad thing about that is that the nutrients of the vitamin D, it takes longer to reach our system. The same thing that's protecting us is the same thing that can cause us depression if we don't handle it carefully. That's why we're built to hot countries. That's why we were built for hot countries. It's got nothing to do with You know, I mean, hot weather's pleasant, don't get me wrong, but it's a scientific thing. It's not a personal thing. It's not cultural. It's just how it is. When your skin is darker, you have more melanin. When your hair is darker, you have more melanin, and you have more resistance to the harmful aspects of the sun, but also you need more sun because you need more nutrients. And that, you know, if the harmful shit is being blocked, then unfortunately it means the good shit is being blocked. We don't take in the sun's nutrients as easily. So sunlight is really, really important. Sunlight is really, really important. Okay. Now, this is the problem. Every time as a targeted individual, you attempt to get your serotonin up, the perps are going to start shit for all the reasons that I mentioned before. So how do you get around that? Perps doing psychological warfare nonsense will affect your serotonin levels, and it will wear away the healthiness of your central nervous system. Perps are also going to be kept awake at night. Indirectly through you being kept awake at night, they're going to be kept awake at night as well, because it's important. If these people are going to be dopamine addicts, you have to keep their dopamine up, which means they can't fucking sleep. It is what it is. It is what it is. There can't be effective weaponized irritants if they're allowed to have their sleep at night. Okay? And then perps will punish you for what they're not getting. So if you're laughing and you're spending time with other TIs and you're spending time with other people, like just other people in general, even if those people are passive aggressive, if you are not isolating yourself, then the perps will try to punish you in some ways for what they're not getting or for what you are getting, simply because it's their job to ruin everything for you and to ruin your serotonin levels. It's their job to do that. And then once again, you'll be attacked in when it comes to exercise. What the electronic torturers like to do is they like to use the active denial system to attack your chest or to attack your knees. I've had when I was in the hostel, I had so many attacks in my joints. So they will attack your joints, they will attack your chest. Like I said, perps will go crazy. You just heard it. Perps will go crazy. Dopamine addiction. So basically, you will get attacked in the joints or the chest when you try to exercise. You'll get attacked at some point in the muscles. They love the lower back. Electronic torturers love the lower back, and they love your jaw. Anything that impedes upon your ability to exercise and get those dopamine levels up and get those soft dopamine levels up, not those dopamine levels, anything that can affect your serotonin, they're going to attack that. They're going to attack that. So the worst attacks electronically are usually when you're trying to sleep, which is why I'm like, even when you use your dopamine to try to get some sleep, it might not always work, because the worst physical attacks and psychological attacks can come when you're sleeping. Yeah. So that brings me to my 9th and final point of the video. Bearing all of this in mind, as a targeted individual, how can you ensure that you get what you want from the equation? How can you ensure that you're able to use your dopamine to your advantage and get a healthy amount of serotonin in your life, even in the midst of attacks electronically and psychologically? Well, the answer that I found that's helped me in the past is to approach your goals as lazily and incrementally as possible. Make your attempts every day so pathetic that they will look down on it and they won't take you seriously. Because the less they take you seriously is the less likely, for the attacks to affect you. And if the attacks don't affect you as much, it will give you more confidence. And if you have more confidence, you will remain consistent, and it will be only a matter of time before you push yourself further and further. When in doubt, do it poorly. When it comes to sleep, when it comes to eating better foods when it comes to aerobic exercises and soft exercises and sunlight and deep breathing and socializing and helping others and laughing more. Slow and steady wins the race. Not even slow, lazy wins the race. When in doubt, do it poorly. Do it fucking poorly. Because what will happen is that, no, you won't have, a rocking body to counteract all the stressful effects that their torturers had on you. You're not going to end up with a rocking body. You're not going to end up with a especially sharp mind or sharp anything. But what it will do is it will develop your inner resilience, both physically and psychologically, to the attacks that you're suffering as a Havana syndrome victim. Okay? The more you pressure yourself, the more your body and your soul will resist, and the more you will feel like shit, and the more it will be easy for these people to torture you. The way you deal with gangstalking is that you have to chip at it. You have to chip at gangstalking the same way gangstalking tries to chip away at you. Turn their tactics into your advantage as a targeted individual. Turn their tactics into your advantage. All right? It all adds up. It all adds up. It doesn't matter how poorly you do it, especially initially. It doesn't matter how poorly you do it. The more you stretch your body, the more you laugh, the more you gain sunlight, all that type of shit. The more you do it, the easier it will become. And the easier it will become is the stronger you will get. And the stronger you will get is the more trouble that gang stalkers will have in dealing with you. Slow, lazy, incremental. That's the best way to do it. They want you to have flaws. They want you to be barely functioning. So barely function. Do it. Don't judge yourself by how, don't judge yourself by how they think you want to be seen. Remove that from your vocabulary. If they want to try to make out like you're useless, be it like, okay, cool. So if I'm useless, that means I can only do things little by little, no? Even if they threaten to kill you, say, okay, well, if you're going to threaten to kill me, that means I have to get my affairs in order, no? Because I'm certainly not going to let you do it. You have to take their tactics and use it to your advantage. Use their tactics that they use on you. Use it to strengthen yourself against their bullshit. You will be amazed at what you're able to do when you can do that. So, I have to go. I was going to talk more about the side effects, but I think I'll leave that for another time. But yes, those are my 9 points with regards to dopamine overload and the connection to gangstalking. I don't know if I can be bothered to upload any links today. I will do what I can. I'll upload some links as and when I find them, all right? So, peace and blessings. I love you so much. Mwah. Bye-bye.